Welcome joining here. I wanted to just start with a quick intro for those who are hopping in as we continue to admit people. My name is Dr. Mena Mirhom. I am at the Athletes for Hope Chief Wellbeing Officer, and I have the privilege of kicking off our Athlete Mental Health Week here with our esteemed guest, Allan Houston, New York Knicks legend, two-time All-Star, Olympic gold medalist, and the founder of FISLL, a wonderful foundation that we're going to be discussing more, focused on faith, integrity, sacrifice, leadership, and legacy. Allan, welcome. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for being an impactful source in the community and just doing really incredible work. I just wanted to welcome you, just appreciate your time, your presence in the New York area, as well as sort of nationally and globally. So thank you for being here with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Doc. I appreciate you all. And I'm excited to tackle this subject. Um, and if anyone who here love to, I know people are kind of don't like to show their faces or what have you, but I would love to see you and engage and eventually get some feedback and interaction with you. Um, I'm excited because throughout my career, this idea of um, being your best self, developing as a whole person has always been something that I've been taught and was very important for me from the very beginning. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. Part of the my beginning of my story I like to share is that my mother and my uncle were friendly with Muhammad Ali, and he and I grew up in the same house, in the two houses down from the house he grew up in. And although we didn't cross paths as a young person, um, I saw him a few times and reminded him that our houses were two doors down from each other, and he got a kick out of that, and would often ask about my mother, ask about me and my journey, how I'm doing, and give me some friendly advice. And so when I think about that background and my father, who was my coach, I grew up really trying to understand like mindset. I tried to understand like what led the top to be the top. What were the common ingredients? Because at such a young age, I was around greatness. I was around my father who coached players who played in the NBA. I heard stories about Muhammad Ali two doors down from me. My father was, and he ended up being an assistant coach for the University of Louisville, and they went to four Final Fours and won two national championships by the time I was 13 or 14. And I just watched all this. And so by the time I started to grow, my legs started to stretch out, and I was a skinny kid with a nice jump shot. Um, I was always driven, to be honest, to do well and perform at a high level at whatever I did. And I have very supportive parents. I had two younger sisters. My parents were teachers, they were educators, and they put a lot of emphasis on being well-rounded,
Mm.
right? And thinking thinking at a high level. So you can't play and perform at a high level unless you think at a high level.
Mm.
And so I just want to talk about like what that, kind of felt like and looked like to me real quick. And I'm framing this quick discussion around value,
Mm.
true value, right? What are we really, really worth? What's our true value? Not what other people say,
Mm.
not how they evaluate us, not how the marketplace evaluates us or values us, not what social media says or evaluates and evaluates, but what is our true value? What does true value really, really mean? Um, quick story. I'm gonna kind of back into this, right? try not to jump around too much because this is a very passionate subject for me. Um, I signed with the New York Knicks in 1996, and I was free agent. And when you're a free agent, obviously, that means you're kind of on the open market. You can sign with whoever you want to sign with, and there's this idea of what's what's the value of this player, this person, so we can sign them. And you're seeing it in high school, you're seeing it in college athletics. There's there's a lot, there's transactions, and athletes are choosing where they go according to what they can get on the open market, right? So I fast forward, I signed with the Knicks, and uh 5 years later, um, I was able to redo my deal. And I became, at that time, the first player in Knicks history to sign a $100 million contract. And I very rarely share that because I don't feel comfortable talking about money, but for the sake of this topic, which is more important, I want to share that. Years later, I'm retired, and I was on this very popular radio show, and the question came up, and I had been retired. The question came up, uh, Alan, did you ever feel like you deserved that max contract? Right? And it has always been pretty sensitive to me because what I said, my response, without having had to really think about it, was, my philosophy in life was no matter if I made $1 or $100 million, I wanted to treat my job, respect my gift, respect the purpose for which I was given the gift the same every day.
Hmm.
That was my response. And uh but something still bugged me about that response later. And I go back a lot about, and I'm like, if I ever get asked that question again, if I were to ask that question again, what I would have said is, on top of that, is what do we really deserve?
Hmm.
What do we truly deserve? Right? And I'm going to pin that because I don't want to answer that question, go into it right now until later, and maybe Father can help me because it's a very spiritual answer,
Hmm.
right? Um, what I want to talk about is how do we not attach our value to our performance, because the world will attach value to performance,
Hmm.
right? The world will attach value to how well you did something, this skill. But we have to look at it internally and eternally and saying my value is not attached to not just the way the world sees it as how well I perform. How do we attach it to our true value, which is who really are we and whose are we, right? Who are we and whose are we? In the sense of, if I'm not seeing myself and my value through the lens of who gave me life in the first place, then what are we talking about,
Right.
right? And so at the beginning, Father said this great prayer, and it just connected with me because before I do these things, I like to connect with my Father in heaven who gave me life, who gave me purpose and gave me identity. So now I can say, the reason I was 6'6" in the first place. Well, I didn't choose to be 6'6", right? I could have been 5'8". Life would have been different,
Hmm.
right? But I was given this not by myself and not by people who don't even matter to me. I was given this by God who gave me the gift in the first place. And so that's where I want to just, if the Zoom cut off right now, that's the message, right? It's 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 that is where we should be placing our value. And seeing ourselves from that lens. But there's a process in doing that, right? It doesn't just happen. You don't just talk about it. Um, and there's things we have to kind of think about and recognize for that to happen. But the first thing I would kind of challenge, people listening and is think about you know, what's another word for value? And this is what I do. I do this when I do workshops with younger people and my mentors and student athletes, and just could put in the chat, whatever. But what's another word for value? Just another word for it, right? Doc, have you ever had anyone just talk about that? What would you say in your work? What's another word that people attach to value?
Sometimes people talk about worth, talk about esteem, talk about, yeah, someone put in the chat price.
Price,
Yeah.
worth. Yeah, I like that. Some people talk about it, importance
Hmm.
or, you know, um, meaning, right? What's that?
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead,
Or
please.
someone says, yeah. And so here's the thing. Think about it, this idea of value. I think about importance,
Hmm.
right? And think about value as what's important to you, right? And that's where your values kind of come from, right? And we often say like list those things that are really, really important to you. If you had to list things that are really important to you, just five things, right? And take some time to really think about five things that are really important to you. Usually family sits there for a lot of people
Hmm.
at the top, right? Um, and you think about maybe health, um, your faith or your religion, right? But you think about those things that are really important to you. And the second part of that is think of the importance of you.
Hmm.
Mhm. So importance to you and importance of you. I never heard that this morning, and just this morning, just thinking about this, it just came to me, right?
Thomas.
And
Safi.
yeah,
Right.
that hit somebody right there. So, so, that's the thing that I really want to kind of really lock in on is how we see our importance and what's important to us, like how we're focused on things that are really important to us and start there instead of what's really not
Hmm.
important. And the importance of us or of you, right? Right. And not to other people,
Hmm.
right? But to who gave you life again, right? That's our I think that's what I look at when I think about our true value. Now, I don't have a slide, but I as I was thinking about this, I was reminded of something that I was inspired to create I think last year. I think it's when it came to me. And it's this idea of a value ladder. So imagine a ladder, right? And you have these steps. And the way I look at the value ladder is you start off with this idea of performance. We talked about performance. Most people look at performance as the thing that is advancing us. School, your work, you're always, evaluated, whether you're conscious of it or not, or whether other people are conscious of it or not. But if you even look at the marketplace, look at digital analysis, right? Clicks, likes, impressions, you know, analytics, numbers, everything is driven by this idea of performance. And it helps people who invest time and energy and money making out an appropriate analysis of what the marketplace sees as value. So performance is very important. It's how well you do something. And that's kind of like the bottom of the what I call the value ladder. Well, your performance is going to be driven from a personal standpoint, it's going to be driven by your mindset. Your mindset is what's going to drive your performance because your mindset is how you do something, right? So if I go into the gym and I go in, low energy, not a positive attitude, focusing on how I feel, injured, hurt, just not into it. Well, guess what? My performance is not going to be good that day.
Right.
If I go into not focus on how I feel, not focus on my mood, uh, but I'm focusing on I'm going to maximize whatever I can get today. Now that is an approach and an attitude that's going to give me a better performance, right?
Mm.
So your performance is going to be driven by your mindset, right? Your mindset takes us to the third step. Your mindset is driven by your perspective. So how do I view what's happening right now, right? Uh, I had a bad game last night, had a bad performance. Something happened to me, something happened around me, something might have happened at home. We just talking about the unfortunate incidents in LA, the fires. If you're in the middle of something like this in a crisis, then your perspective is going to probably shift
Mm.
your mindset, right? Because your view of what's happening in your experience is going to move you in a certain direction, or it's going to make your view change. But I would say that we can still have control over that.
Mm.
We can still have control over our perspective. We can't control our experience, so to speak, what happens, but I think we can control how we view it, right? And that's the thing that I think is something that so your performance is driven by your mindset is driven by your perspective. Your perspective is driven by your values. So we talked about this idea of values earlier, and I have a thought that I really hold on to, and that thought is if we want to really increase our value, then we have to hold on to our values,
Mm. Oh, that's really good. Yes,
right?
yeah.
So the exercise is what are our values?
Mhm.
What are they? And one of the things that I've learned as a professional and now going out of sports, I didn't think about this until I actually left competition, is what are my values, right? Fortunately, though, for me, I had seen a certain value system um, established at home. I had seen a certain value system um, produced and um, lived out in people that I admired, mentors, leaders. So I'd seen certain values that were aspirational to me.
Mm.
Did you see
And
that?
that's what I
Oh, sorry,
go
I
ahead.
just
Go ahead,
question.
Doc.
Did you see that while you were playing and in the league, or did you see it
Yeah.
afterwards?
More after, but in the league I saw them. I just wasn't as reflective on them, right? But I saw them in leaders like Patrick Ewing, my coaches, John Starks, Joe Dumars, Isaiah Thomas, and people who I really looked to. But it started because I saw a pattern at home,
Mm.
right? I saw a pattern, right, that was modeled, right, around people that I trusted. And that's why people who are on this Zoom, who are leaders working with young people, is so important to see your actions and your thoughts and your behaviors and your words because you're modeling something, right? You're modeling something. Now, some people might say, "Oh man, that's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of work." Well, it's what it is. It's what it is, and you got to understand your impact. And if you're a young person on here, you're no different because you're modeling something for someone else too, right? And so the power is, what if the young person, the player, and the coach or the adult person are modeling the same thing? That's when you got something powerful.
Mm,
That's when you have winning. That's when you have championship pedigree, right? So when your values between your coach and the coachee, the coach and the player, parent, the child, leader, employee, when you have values that you are aligned on together, man, now that is a winning culture, right? But the key is, how are we doing that,
mm,
right? Right? What are they? Right? Cultures. Once one of my mentors told me that, said culture is only behavior in action. It's what it is. So our values are our beliefs and our behaviors. So they drive our perspective. Perspective is going to drive our mindset. Our mindset is going to drive our performance. Now, there's one last step at the top of this value ladder that I believe is the most important. Well, what drives values? What drives that? What gives me my values? And that is the core of this discussion, which is truth.
mm,
Mm.
Truth is what's going to drive our values. So, people are like, well, what is truth? Even in the Bible, Pontius Pilate asked Jesus, what is truth?
mm,
What is it? Right? And think about, I see truth, right, as my identity and my purpose lining up, right?
mm,
Like, we went at the very beginning, we talked about, whose am I? Again, if God has given me life, and I truly believe that He's given me purpose, believe He's given me my identity, well, then that's the truth. Nothing can come against that truth, right? Because if my experience lines up with what has been put in place, right, then you can't convince me of anything else, because it's that's evident, right? So you think about I look at truth as IP, right? Well, most people see IP as this idea of intellectual property, something that's yours, you own, that you produce. I look at it as identity and purpose lining up together. Why am I, who am I and why am I here?
mm,
Who am I and why am I here? If we could like start there, then everything else kind of falls in line. My values come from that. My perspective will come from that, will shift to that. My mindset will shift to that. And then my performance is going to line up. Now, that does not mean that it's always going to be smooth.
mm.
That's the thing. The way I'm talking about it is, oh man, that's it. Now all I got to do is think about that. I get fouled. I want to get us. I'm trying not to get my second technical. And now you talking about values and perspective. You talking about all this stuff. Well, guess what? We lost game two in 2001 because I got 4 fouls and I wanted to punch that ref in his throat. But I didn't. And even if I had, right, these still things would have been true,
Mm.
right? It would have just been, how am I investing in these things? So the key is not looking at my value, my performance, not looking at how I'm doing based on what other people are saying or doing, not based on how I feel that in that moment, you know, not based on what's going on around me, but based on what I really know about myself, right? What I know to be true, and that's the standard. And as I think about, I'm gonna come back to some help from Father here because um, there's a verse in the book of Matthew, and it's asked a question: what is a man profit if he loses his soul?
Mm.
Or what can we offer in exchange for our soul? Right? And the reason I think that's important is in the text is challenging us to say, well, what really matters? What really matters? And I asked my daughter that recently. She's a junior in high school, and she was laughing and trying not to answer the question and just joking. But I kept pushing. I kept pushing. No, no, I want to know what you to know. I want to know what you think. Because a lot of times, like, I found that people really do, they just need to kind of think about this a little bit. Just think about it, right? It's in there.
You got to
It's
pull
in
it
there.
out. Yeah.
Just, man, just think. So basically, the thing was said material things don't have real value.
Mm.
That was really kind of, and so I said, yeah, that's a great answer. Material things, not that they don't have any value, right? It's what's most valuable.
Mm.
What's most valuable is who we are on the inside, our inner person, right? Because we can focus so much on the material stuff, the likes, the contract, the salary, um, who's getting this,
Mm.
the awards, achievements. We can focus so much on that, which is gaining the world. But then we can do all that and lose ourself, lose our soul,
Mm.
right? Our soul is that part of us that connects with God, that really is attached to what's really important. And it's really, really hard not to try to gain the world.
Mm.
It's really hard not to try to gain the world because it's around. It's like we're in this rapids. We're in this white water rapids, and it's like the world. All these things are taking us in this direction. Look at this. Think about this. Focus on this. Buy this. Right? And you can focus. You can get so focused on that you can lose what's important, your soul. And what was another word for value? Importance,
Mm.
right? Importance of not just what's important to me, but the importance of me, right? And so I think that's really, to be honest, like what I felt to hit on is, man, what is our true value when you think about that? And I think now when we talk about like mental health,
Mm.
can't separate physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. We look at mental health as this one thing about, oh man, what's going on in that person's head? But it's so much more complex than that, right? And so that's why I wanted to talk about this idea of true value, because your true value is not based on what everybody else says it is, right? It's how I'm aligned with who I really, really am. And I'm just going to pause. I'm going to pause right there and see if anybody
Yeah,
has any thoughts, question.
there's
Because
gonna
anything else, I'm just going to be rambling.
no, no, this is amazing. I know there's gonna be a lot of questions definitely from the chat. One question I wanted to sort of start off with, you mentioned that, it's a beautiful thing to have that modeled out, whether when you were coming to the league, you had these leadership, sort of
Mhm.
people you were looking to, or at home in the family. Sometimes when I'm speaking to a young person, they say, I never really saw it modeled, right? I don't know what it looks like, So if
Mhm.
I'm trying to figure it out,
Mhm.
how would you sort of walk them through the process? How do I ask myself the right questions? If there isn't somebody in front of me walking me through, question work,
Mhm.
how do I try to discover values if I never saw it played out for me?
I think that's a great one. I think that one exercise we talked about was really sit with yourself and reflect and say what's really important to you in life.
Mm,
Um, you know, we have a thing called, I'm going to share this Fizzle hand. We have a little handbook. I just created this little guide almost, right? And we asked, first of all, like, what does winning in life really mean?
mm,
What's like, we're all, I feel like everybody's a, people talk about athletes and non-athletes. I don't know if I agree with this idea that they're non-athletes because I think we're born to try to win in life. We're trying to accomplish, like we're trying to achieve, right? We know they put those babies in the and on the court. Babies are just crawling. They're still trying to get somewhere,
Yeah, yeah.
right? They're trying to win. They're looking over there like I'm trying to beat you, right? I think we're born. So we have this idea of what does it really mean though to win in life, and uh, you really think about that. Like I think it's more thinking about those type things, thinking prompting like that question, what's important to you?
Mm,
What does it mean to win in life? What do you really want to accomplish? You know, why do you even like who do you really want to become
mm,
too? So when you think about those questions, you start to think, well, shoot, I'm looking around here, I don't see that.
mm,
Or maybe right there I do see that. Because I remember like when I tell rookies a lot, look around. Just sit, talk, just look around. Look around, look at the room. You start to see those veterans, those older guys, those older girls who you like, okay, I see how they're moving. That's how I want to move when I get to that point, right? And you start to see over there now, see, he's not gonna be there that long. She's not gonna be there that long. You see, look, Karen's laughing. She knows. You see the people like, okay. And what you start taking these notes is you don't even realize you're taking these notes in your mind that I'm like, okay, you kind of see it, but you may not be aware of it. All we're saying to the answer to your question is start writing them down, being aware of it,
mm,
right? Start writing these things down. Like, okay, I want to do this. I want to be this. Oh, here's a good one. Last night we were just at dinner. Glad this came up. And do this as a prompt when you're at dinner with your family, your friends, right? Group. Do this as a prompt. Say, hey, we're gonna go around and I want you all to fill in the blank. And the prompt is, I want to be a person or a player that blank. I want to be a person or player that blank. And everybody just fill in that blank.
mm,
Because what you're gonna find is like this is basically mine was I want to be a person that could be counted on.
mm,
Mm.
I want somebody to, in the chat, if you feel comfortable, just say, hey, I'll fill in that blank. I want to be a person that, a word, it could be a sentence. And so I think when you talk about, I'm not sure if I've seen this modeled. Well, guess what? We work with a lot of young men who haven't had fathers.
mm,
But they can see what they didn't have. And when they do become fathers, they say, I know now this is what I want to do that I didn't, I may not have gotten it, but I know what I do want to do,
mm.
you know? And so I think it's a matter of just writing it down, internalizing it. And the next thing is just find a mentor, find a coach,
Say
ask
who
somebody
you
for
surround
help.
yourself with. It's who you
Yes.
surround yourself with because that player in the locker room, he has his circles, and we see this all the time from a young age. Whoever you spend the most time with, is the person that um, you become more like, like you hear
Mhm.
all these stories about these basketball players that are spending time with the players that are pushing them the most, or they're watching them in the gym, they're up early, they're doing this and that. So they pick up on these values. Same thing in your spiritual life. You surround
Mhm.
yourself with people who pray more. You're gonna pray.
Mhm.
Some people you just like look at that as an example for you. And I think you hit it on the spot that I think looking internally is one part, but also looking externally at the people and how
Mhm.
they're living their life is a
Mhm.
big aspect.
Mhm. Mhm. That's really good. It's really good. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. Look at externally at the thing. It's almost like when my daughter said material things have no value. I said, well, they have some value.
Mm.
You know, it's where you place them on the totem pole, because there have been people who have done great things for a lot of people who had a lot of material things that offered them, gave them, taught, trained, used their platform in a great way, right? But where do you start again, your truth and your values from?
Yeah, and there's a question, Alan, maybe similar to that in the chat. I wanted to get your thoughts on is basically dealing with failure. What advice do
Mm,
you give a younger person who failed in an area, dealt with hardship? How do you sort of begin again? How do you deal with
mm,
that setback, whether it's an injury or a disappointment? How do you deal with that as a young person?
mm. Man, I'm so glad that like this conversation came up because I immediately I actually just went to the ladder, man. I went to the ladder. And
Mm,
when I went to the ladder, I went to perspective.
mm,
So what I went to is because this happened, when I had to retire, I was young in compared to like some of my peers, I was still young. And I'm like, man, why so soon? But as soon as as soon as I would say that, I'm like, nah, what just wasn't, it's all in the plan. It's for something good. This is for my good.
mm.
That is my perspective.
Basketball player.
And that perspective has to come from something. God wouldn't have allowed this to happen if it wasn't going to be eventually for my good.
Mm,
So basically, what my thing is, I'm in training for something.
mm,
And I always be like, we're always in constant training for something. Failure is not truly failure. It never is truly failure.
mm,
Never really is. You know, uh, we can have a hard time accomplishing something, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be accomplished, right? It's just not in this time or this maybe way, right? So every part of our experience is our journey is basically fuel for what needs to happen,
mm,
right? It's it just hadn't stopped there, right? And that's again why I think perspective is so important. Perspective is so important, but because it shouldn't land on the negative or the dismal. It shouldn't land there,
mm,
right? It should only be like almost like a something that propels it to the next thing,
mm,
right? And that's what the right perspective will do, in my opinion. So it's like it's not failure. It's not it's not permanent, right? It's temporary, and it's fuel, right? For whatever it's propelling you to happen. Um, that's meant to be for God's glory. At the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, the way I see it is like anything that happens is for his glory. It's supposed
mm,
to happen because he's supposed to be the one that good or bad. If the bad things happen, you know what? People are, okay, let me see if he's really about this stuff he's been talking about now.
mm,
Let me see. So when some bad things happen, it's still for God's glory.
mm,
Because people can say, "Oh man, he was like still positive. He was still respectful. He was still this, still that." That could bring somebody, uplift somebody too in our not so good times.
Mm. Similarly, there's another question out in the chat going back to IP, what you mentioned about identity and purpose.
Mm.
Of how do you connect your gift to your purpose and the path that God has for you? You know, for you, maybe he was thinking about, oh, I got this jump shot. Maybe somebody else is trying to figure out as they're going through college, what are
Mm.
the gifts that God has given me and the path forward? What's a good process for someone to discern, how they can use what they've been given to be able to glorify God in the way that makes sense for
And first word is gratitude.
them?
So you could always be grateful. I'm grateful I'm still grateful for the gift. I go down there and shoot, and people always tell me, man, your shot, this and this and that. And I'm grateful.
Hmm.
I'm grateful that God gave me something that people can look at as art, as like, man, they literally look at it as art. And my thing is like, I just want to go in. It can look good, but it's got to go in.
You
You know
still
what
got
I
it.
mean?
I'd say the last
Still
time we
got to
saw
go
you.
in, man. So I have a responsibility
Mm,
to that art. You
mm,
know, that's the way I see it, right? I have a responsibility to because people are seeing something bigger than me through that art.
mm,
That's how we're all artists, right? We all are. And God gave me a jump shot. He gave that person something different. And it doesn't matter what level, right? It don't matter if it's NBA. It don't matter what level. It's
mm,
still art, man. And one of my favorite verses is we're all God's workmanship.
mm,
We're all his masterpiece. And we all have something, there's a kid somewhere that sees that gift and is inspired by that gift,
mm,
And so that's how I basically connect the identity and purpose because it didn't come from me,
mm,
right? It's like if someone gave you uh, a Lamborghini, you're gonna like, man, I gotta take care of this, man.
mm,
Like, I can't just run this into the ground. Like, I'm gonna get the right gas. This is a Lamborghini, you know, and you're gonna treat it, you're gonna respect it, you're gonna be in awe of it. And there it goes. To go back to perspective. How do you see your gift?
mm. I love that. And I want to call out some of the comments people in the chat when you asked them to share kind of what kind of person I want to be. Some people said, inspiring others positively, drawing others to pointing to God, making a difference. And one of the other questions that were related also to what you're saying here of how you see your gift, someone
Mhm.
basically asked about the blueprint or the playbook, right? Like when you're starting a new team, you get traded, maybe you're someone who just went to the Lakers today, you got to learn the
Mhm.
plays, you got to learn if you're someone who's trying to navigate values, you
Mhm.
mentioned biblical values a lot. That was one place maybe for people to get a blueprint. What's a good source of truth for people to know, like what's true, what's not? If something on my newsfeed is telling me this is true, how do I know
Mhm.
it's true? How do
Right.
I sort of get a blueprint to know what to follow?
I'm gonna share this handbook
Hmm.
um because let me see if I can pull it up. We created FISLL. We created this. Let me see here. I'm gonna share this. Um, we created this thing called the fundamentals of life. It was really based on my all the things that I'm sharing come from this. I'm gonna share this with you, Doc. Matter of fact, I think I can share the link in here. But um, we talk a lot about this. We talked about this earlier. It's desire. What do you want to accomplish? And I think from really seeking this idea, what do you really want to accomplish and why, and who you want to become? I think those truths start to line up.
Hmm.
But what I'll share is, these are the five that were given to me. And when I look at these five, um, I as a Christian, as a believer, um, truth is powerful,
Hmm.
right? Because when God says, truth, it's like look at what people, first of all, look at what people say, what they do, and are they consistent? Is it real? Like you got to start really evaluating things and people for yourself,
Mm,
and you'll start to see the inconsistencies. You'll start to see truths that line up. You'll start to see, and and again, it goes back to like, where do I want to fit in that?
mm,
That's where got that from my father. My father, I looked at coaches. I looked at what he showed me, and and I just reflected, man. I said, let me write down things that I feel that I saw, how I want to show up, and I think that will make an impact. And I wrote those 5 words down.
mm,
And so this is not only my blueprint, but this is, I believe, the blueprint that I was chosen to share,
mm,
you know? But then what we do with this is we say, like, how do you define faith? You got to define your values.
mm,
You got to look at them and say, how do I define faith? How do I define integrity?
mm,
Right? How do I define sacrifice? You know what I mean? How do I define leadership? Someone said something about who I want to be a person that I saw someone said, I want to be a person that inspires people.
mm,
How are you going to inspire some people if not consistent
mm,
and you're not sacrificing, you're not leading by service,
mm,
right? If you're not pouring confidence into people, right? And then the legacy, you know, you got to be aware of your impact,
mm.
right? I'm gonna put this, and I'm gonna say, I think I can put this in the chat.
Yeah.
But uh, having a blueprint, just first of all, like even thinking about that is really a big start.
Mm,
Even if you don't have like it all, but even thinking about what is my blueprint, what is it? Because when you start thinking about that in itself, things will start to kind of surface that you will be able to say, yeah, I'm going to shape that. The most successful as the world determines people in the world do this exercise. You can't run a billion-dollar organization unless you really have thought through these things, right? So we're no different, right? We're all CEOs of our own, space and brand, right? We're all brands, and it's important to establish what that blueprint's going to be. Um, and start to really shape it. And the other thing that father you said is really important is who's helping you do that?
mm.
Who's partnering, collaborating with, who's helping you? You can't just have anybody in that inner circle. You
Yeah.
know, you can't have anybody in there. So who do you really trust? And that's why I take time to feel like, man, I I've done that and it's helped me over the years and started like, man, I see that person as someone I would like to just pick their brain, get to know, and I think that's been very, very helpful.
Yeah, St. Paul says evil company corrupts good habits. I feel like
Hmm.
we always talk about that in that way. Evil company corrupts good habits. But I think the positive switch is also true.
Mm,
Good company adds good habits and
mm,
creates good habits and creates good values and gives you a perspective from that you might have not seen, a
mm,
perspective that, like you said, looking internally, look at not who we are only, but whose we are.
mm,
Like you mentioned, like
Mhm.
if we look at how God made us and remember that and
mm,
remember his intention for us, then our perspective automatically changes and the way we go about life changes as well.
Mm.
100%. And that relates maybe to another question to Alan that was in the chat of as we're navigating like sometimes the downs of life with perspective and with like the support of people around us, how do you also navigate even the positive things and not getting sort of too, having somewhat of a balance,
Mm.
right? where you don't, okay,
Yeah.
you made an all-star team. So now you don't think of yourself as better than everybody else, or something nice happened and you don't get too caught up in being defined by that in the same way that you don't get too discouraged by, a failure or a setback. How do you sort of maintain sort of an
Mhm.
even keel? Question from Megan there.
Yeah, that's a great question because you don't hear that one as much as we should. Dealing with adversity and dealing with prosperity are both important. You
Mm.
know, things go well, and like we see it a lot when we work with our young athletes. They may have a good game and they think, "Oh my gosh, I should be ranked number one. I'm this, I'm that." Like, dude, you just had one, you know, 5 minutes. You don't want to crush them, but like, you did that great move, but no, you didn't make the shot, whatever. Like, and and so, uh, man, just having a sense of humility,
Mm.
right? And I'm gonna put that on me as a father, as a leader. I think that's one of our biggest jobs as leaders is to be humble,
Mm.
speak humbly, right? Act humble, right? When my kids are around me, like I try to really watch that. Try to watch it. You see someone, you respect people the way you respect anyone, right? And I think that is really the biggest key to that is just always remaining keeping a humble spirit no matter what, even more. I think I heard it the highest one of the highest forms of confidence is humility.
Mm. I love that a lot. And I know you're mentioning the fatherhood. We were talking about it a little bit this morning, kind of just looking through the different programs in FISLL. And I know there's some people, with us today who are young people, and there's some who are parents. As you're talking to like fathers of young athletes, I know you're mentioning, of course, like the importance of modeling humility there. Is there
Mhm.
anything else that you sort of try to have them see as fathers, like in specifically sort of guiding? I know you have 7 children, and so you've walked through
Mhm.
this for a lot of them. How do you sort of what kind of fatherhood advice would you share with like maybe a new dad or somebody who's navigating what it's like to be a father?
I think two things that come to mind. One is men, we don't understand the power of love and affection,
Mm,
right? Understand the power of telling your son or your daughter, I love you. I still tell my sons every day I love them. I
mm,
might give them a hug. It's powerful. It's important, right? But you also have the other part that is discipline.
mm,
But the biggest thing I would say is we have to live a disciplined life because at some point, a young person is going to start not listening, but looking.
mm,
They're going to be like, all right, man, whatever, 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 whatever. But they're still looking. They're still looking at how you live in your life. They're still looking at what you're doing. And I think I think that the father, one of the biggest father's role is to uh, model discipline
mm,
and to have and to expect discipline. So I feel like if you show that love and then you can discipline more effectively because they feel right, loved, supported, and challenged.
mm,
I feel like one thing is that we're finding that we got to kind of really keep navigating and figuring out is how to keep challenging, our student athletes and time because we're saying, man, this world is tough with social media and it's tough on them, yes, but at the same time, we still want to be challenged.
mm,
Anybody who wants to excel at something wants to be challenged. They want it. So I would say it's not it's still I've always heard and I saw it like when you have children, everybody's different. Um, it's like you don't as a father, you're just like, what do I? It's hard to know what to expect.
mm,
Um, it can be scary, but I think the power of your presence is really important. Like you don't underestimate the power of just your presence. Sometimes I feel like I gotta go in and say some like profound thing and all this, and it's like, nope, just being there. Being there at the game,
Mm.
driving to practice. We don't have to talk about anything, right? And most of the time I heard them say, just thank you for being there. Just thank you for, just taking me, you know what I mean? And so uh consistency is really important. And yeah, but I do think I look back at my father and I hear people talk about their fathers, they look back and remember, that they were whether they were just consistent or not,
Mm.
and just disciplined them, you know.
Well, I think that's a good place for us to, I got to tell you, like, I appreciate the power of your presence in,
Mm.
in this. This has been like an incredibly powerful and like moving conversation. I want to be just mindful of your time. I know it's game day. We got, and I know everyone in the chat has been just really grateful for the whole conversation. And especially, I wanted to highlight one thing of the many awesome things that you said, that integration of spiritual health, mental health, physical health. That's part of the reason we're doing this whole week all together, is that, we want to be a whole person that is integrated, that is well in every way, right? And I think you really
Mhm. Mhm.
let us in that track.
Yeah.
I can't thank you enough, Legend. I know, we're just really grateful. I know being incredibly busy. And I'd want to just everyone who tuned in, both like now live as well as we'll share the recording later, please check out FISLL for these incredible resources. Just continue to
Mhm.
follow this blueprint of what it's like to grow in faith and integrity and sacrifice and leadership and legacy. Um, and
No,
just
I appreciate it too. I appreciate everybody's feedback and engagement. And shout out to Carolyn. Carolyn, where you from? Where you from?
I'm from Virginia.
Okay. Are you an athlete? You're a student athlete?
I played field hockey in college and now I'm in occupational therapy grad school.
Wonderful. All right. Well, best to you. I appreciate you tapping in and showing your face, you know what I mean, and just being engaged. I appreciate that. And everybody else here. I think I want to introduce you, Barry Woods. Barry Woods is on here. He's our lead trainer. We're working on all our
How we doing?
mentorship programs. We do a lot. We talk every day and just see so many different experiences from our young people. And just really good, to be partnering with him. And I think he gave you his email. One of the
Yeah,
things we're trying to do with the handbook is really trying to take a survey of, is this something that's a good tool
yes,
for young people and people, like Carolyn, like you're working with young people, you're working with athletes, you are an athlete still, you're still working with athletes. We're really trying to get an idea of if this tool, this conversation really is helpful, and one, in what ways.
mm,
So I appreciate you all's feedback on that. Um,
yeah,
yeah, just
yeah.
be
We
blessed.
would love for you guys to participate in a little bit more in-depth conversation around the handbook. Like you said, just trying to understand how these tools can affect dialogues like these that we're trying to foster through the FISLL fundamentals. So if you guys could definitely send me your email, we'd love to continue this dialogue. Love to continue seeing how the handbook could be more effective to support athletes and mental health, especially young people all around the country in mental health.
absolutely. Absolutely. We'll definitely be doing that there. Appreciate that. Uh,
Definitely.
Yeah, man. Well, Doc, appreciate you, man. Looking forward to um doing more, man.
Likewise, likewise, Alan. Thank you so much. Thank you for those who participated. Also, drop Father Daniel's email for those to
Yeah.
be in touch there. And just have an awesome day, Alan. I know there's going to be way more events that we've got going on. Our partnership is growing in in schools and other initiatives that we'll be working on together with FISLL. So just grateful for your presence and your time and for being here with us. We appreciate you.
Appreciate you guys.
Thank you
God
so
bless.
much. Thank
All
you.
God
right.
bless. All
Peace and
right.
blessings. All right.
All right.
All right. Yeah.